There are many myths and rumors regarding what rests at the bottom of Lake Tahoe. Some say it hides a graveyard for mobsters and Chinese rail workers, while others claim it holds some prehistoric monster lurking deep within its fathoms. I can't say for sure what resides in the lake, but a few years ago I discovered something truly astonishing below it. The summer was mild and dry around Tahoe. Birds of all sorts fluttered through the trees and small rodents scurried about the underbrush. My dog, Max, barked as happily as any dog could while we took a nice afternoon walk down a plain dirt hiking trail. The trail carved a path some ways away from the lake, but the nature of the deep wood proved enjoyable enough. I took solace from the stresses of life in the solitude and serenity of the place, while Max simply loved all the unique smells and critters. When we reached a flat stone, I sat down and pulled my backpack to my side. While I occupied myself digging through its contents, seeking a water bottle, Max suddenly grew quiet. A low growl emanated from his throat. I froze. I had never seen a bear before, but I heard horrific stories of grizzlies biting off people's faces and batting their bodies around like a cat with a new toy. Desperately hoping Max would scare off whatever caught his attention, I slowly drew the closest thing to a weapon I had, a flashlight. The forest stood deathly still. I took a step forward and bent down to stroke Max's fur. Before my fingertips grazed his neck, he bolted like a bat out of hell. The leash tore from my hand and dangled along as my dog dashed through the trees barking wildly. I tried to follow, but keeping up while trying to navigate the shrubbery, stones, and exposed roots proved impossible. Eventually even his barking faded. For what seemed like a long time I stood alone in the woods, holding my battery-powered club in the air and listening to the sounds of nature play out around me. I had the bright idea of using one of Max's milk bone treats to try and lure him out, but I had left my pack back on the trail. The trail I could no longer find after that blind flight. I wandered the woods calling Max's name. Hours passed, and soon the sun sank low in the sky. A weight of worry formed in my gut, both for myself and my pet. My bag contained a cell phone to call for help, a first aid kit in case I got injured, jerky, and water. All gone now. Despair nearly set in when I heard it. It was faint at first, hard to make out, but as I moved closer the sound grew clear. It was barking. I flicked my flashlight on and rushed as fast as I could through the dimly illuminated trees. The white orb I cast helped me avoid the most severe of obstacles, and before I knew it the trees parted and all hope melted away. Looming in front of me was a tall hill, the base of which cracked to reveal a large opening partially hidden by tall grass. Barking echoed from within. Cautiously, I peeked into the cavern entrance. It appeared to form some kind of natural tunnel. I called Max's name until my lungs gave out, but the sound of the barking never came closer. I had no choice. Convincing myself I'll be fine as long as I had a flashlight, I climbed into the yawning maw of the cave. The air inside felt cool and moist. The floor was uneven stone caked with mud, twigs, and the droppings of small animals. I placed my hand on the wall to keep my footing as I made my way forward. Ordinarily, caves branch out into multiple directions, or contain drops, or turns, or anything of that sort. But not this one. Aside from a few stalactites and stalagmites, it formed an almost perfect tunnel moving straight through. Even stranger, the deeper I went the more smooth and square the stone became. After about half an hour or so of walking through this bizarre cave, I noticed the floor had a slight incline down. Curiosity, fear, and caring for Max swirled through my mind. Could this be an old mine shaft? Where are the wooden beams? Why was the entrance so bare? My thoughts raced. Every time I considered turning back, the barking grew in volume and intensity. I became determined to press on. After around an hour of spelunking, I took a hard step down a small, unexpected drop. I couldn't believe my eyes. The flashlight illuminated a clearly carved set of stone stairs leading deeper into the earth. Overcome by bewilderment, I continued to descend. Just as before, the further I went, the more unnatural the tunnel became. The walls, ceiling, and steps grew smooth and darker in color. Eventually, my fatigue set in and I sat on the steps. I don't remember falling asleep. I remember leaning down to the side and wondering who might have created such a strange place and why. I remember turning off my flashlight to save batteries and staring deep into the darkness. I remember hearing the barking, so loud it could be just a few feet ahead. Then, I remember waking up. My body ached from sleeping in such an awkward position for so long. How long, I couldn't say. My hand, still clutching the light, flicked it on. Everything looked the same as before, and yet it felt far more disturbing. I listened to the deafening silence to try and figure out the cause. The barking. There was no barking. Not a single sound could be heard save my shallow breaths. I opened my mouth to call out to Max, but held my tongue. My instincts told me that making even the slightest noise would alert my presence to something other than my lost dog. With ninja-like movements, I crept further down the sprawling stairway. Around another hour passed. The atmosphere of the tunnel, while frightening before, now held such an eerie sensation I couldn't help but look over my shoulder every few minutes. The walls now sported a strange, carved, vine-like design which snaked its way along the corridor. The air had a damp, musty smell which lingered in the nostrils. A faint trickling sound could be heard ahead. My thirst was immense, yet the darkness and the silence had taken its toll. I thought the sound was a product of my desperate imagination. Still, my pace increased. I had taken to walking with the light off, as every step remained the same as the last, so when I put my foot down and landed on elevated ground I fell off balance and tumbled to the floor. The eternal stairway had ended. Tears streamed from my eyes as I caressed the smooth, tiled floor with insurmountable joy. Fading light pierced the darkness with the flick of a flashlight switch. The first thing I noticed was the size of the cavern. The ceiling stretched so high the light barely illuminated it, while the vast open space ahead seemed to continue on forever. The second thing I noticed were the buildings. That's right, buildings. Carved straight from the stone, tall two-story buildings, complete with open doorways, lacking doors, and windows, lacking glass, lined the street. The street itself had large tiles of a much brighter stone, seemingly white in the dim light. Where a sidewalk would be sat badly eroded canals in which water continuously flowed. Small bridges connected each doorway to the street. My mouth hung agape. I never thought there could be anything like this in the world, let alone in America. I reasoned I had stumbled upon some ancient native civilization. With that explanation in mind I made my way to one of the waterways and reached down to scoop up a handful. It felt cold in my fingers and looked clear beneath the light. I satisfied my thirst and turned my attention to one of the many houses. From shining my light through the door I could tell the place was empty. No table, no bed, no pottery, nothing. Peering into other houses had the same result. A heavy feeling of trepidation kept me from entering any of the buildings. It was as if invading the privacy might conjure up some offended spirit to possess my body or devour my soul. Since they were empty anyway, and I had no intention to upset any local ghosts, I journeyed deeper into this strange metropolis. Everything seemed so surreal. The roads were narrow and the buildings high. The two-story buildings turned to three-story, then four, then molded together with others to form massive structures given support by large stone shelves jetting into the darkness above. Alleyways beckoned between each tower, yet my fear kept me from venturing down any. In this busier section stood statues depicting bizarre creatures somewhat resembling a cross between insects and reptiles. Some were horrific, with sharp teeth, claws, and multiple legs, while others were so smooth and harmless looking they could even be called cute. All lacked eyes. Standing roughly the height of a very tall man, they held up mounds of dirt. In this dirt sprouted glowing mushrooms of varying size and color. The light proved faint, but with the batteries of my flashlight near death I elected to rely on the mushroom's natural illumination. As I traversed the strange landscape I couldn't help but ponder what these statues represented. Perhaps some forgotten gods once worshipped by the people here, or maybe monsters from folk stories no longer told, or it could even be something they saw when peering deep into the spanning darkness. The thought unsettled me. That's when I noticed just how many places to hide there were, the empty doors and windows, the claustrophobic alleyways, the deep running canals, even the empty black beyond the reaches of the light. Paranoia nagged at my mind. More than once I saw movement in the corner of my eye and spun around only to face empty shadow or another monstrous stone being. The streets became unreasonably narrow while the hollow buildings stared down in silent anger. The incessant sound of water no longer gave me comfort, as it provided adequate noise to hide any slithering footsteps or fluttering wings. No matter what pleasant thoughts I tried to distract myself with, a greatly unpleasant one dominated my mind: what happened to the people that once lived here? The unseeing statues gradually increased in both unusual features and size the further on I wandered. Some of them were comprised of a million round eggs bursting with small pointy legs, others had multiple mouths snapping and devouring each other, and a few of the unearthly horrors appeared to be in various states of decomposition, with exposed organs unlike any I've seen falling from torn away flesh. Even in stone, the sight filled me with dread. Before I had a chance to turn back I stepped beyond the threshold of the constricting structures and into open space. I surmised this to be the center of the city, as all streets and canals led to this location. My expectations of some governmental palace or inspiring temple were dead wrong, for in the middle of this subterranean marvel I saw a vast pit hundreds of feet across and an unimaginable distance deep. The buildings, which stretched endlessly up into the darkness, circled the perimeter of the pit, with the grotesquely sculpted nightmare creatures sometimes merging with their walls. The glowing fungi, which would sprout at random from each immense beast, was bright enough and large enough to outshine street lamps. Each canal emptied into the gaping void. The cascading water rushed down into the darkness. I stood at the edge, careful of my footing, and peered into the chasm. Perhaps a trick of the eye, but I swear I saw something swirling deep in the impenetrable darkness. The air flowing up from the depths was thick, each breath I took clouded my mind. I concentrated hard and my unbroken gaze searched for whatever secrets this labyrinth held. What I found nearly broke my sanity. A sound reverberated out of that cold, empty expanse. A voluminous, unnatural sound which I immediately recognized. Before I was too far off so it sounded genuine, but now I knew the truth. The cruel mockery of a dog's bark echoed through the darkness. I ran. My feet felt heavy and my mind swam. Dark forms appeared from the buildings, the alleyways, even crawling up from the canals. They scurried on the walls, slithered through the streets, and fluttered through the air. They screeched out sickening cackles that rang in my head. I screamed and swung my flashlight, but dared not look directly upon them. I turned corner after corner, dodging the groping limbs and appendages, hopelessly trying to navigate my way to freedom. Far behind the sound of explosive thunder, or perhaps an otherworldly roar, tore through my mind. I clutched my ears and felt some warm liquid pouring from them. Everything spun. I must have passed out then, for I next opened my eyes while laying on those smooth-tiled streets. None of my assailants could be seen, just those gently glowing mushrooms and the ever-watching houses stretching up into the black sky. I lost consciousness once more. I woke up to sound of birds chirping and sunlight streaming through the trees. With unsteady feet I rose from the dirt and looked around. I was back at the entrance to the cave, or rather former entrance, as the crevice had somehow closed up. My head throbbed as if I had just come off a week-long bender. I stumbled my way through the woods and somehow made it back to the trail. Astonishingly, Max was waiting obediently by my bag. He had torn open both his milk bones and the jerky and devoured it all. I gave him some affection then checked my phone. I was met with missed calls and texts galore. 3 days had passed, according to the date. Most disturbing of all, though, was my appearance. Dried blood trailed down my nose, my ears, even my eyes. It soaked into the top of my shirt. I took Max, and my things, and traveled down the trail to the banks of the lake. I washed up as best as I could and went to go tell the world what I had found. Needless to say, no one bought it. The story goes that I wandered into the woods, tripped on a root and hit my head, then spent the 3 days hallucinating. I've had so much therapy and medication shoved down my throat that I almost started to believe it myself. But each night I know the truth. Each night when I close my eyes I'm back in that dark necropolis. Each night I see pale, humanoid figures peering from the windows and the doorways, the alleys, and the canals. Each night I hear their soft laughter echo against the serene stone. Each night I walk that winding maze of streets, traversing toward my final destination. And each night I gaze long into the abyss, and the abyss gazes back.